The only chance Africa has to be able to develop is for the African society to be divided into 3 different groups, right? Unlike what we have now. So what we have now is that the African society is divided between the masses, the elites, and the politicians. But when the society is divided in these 3 stages, or in these 3 status, it is almost impossible for such society to develop, because the politicians and the elites will always work together against the masses. Now, the only chance Africa has to develop is for us to have a different form of status, a different form of grouping, right? And that form of grouping and status will now be the politicians, kings, and slaves, right? When we have these 3 forms of status, there's going to be these drastic developments in our continent. Now, how does this 3 form of status work? I'm going to start from the one we have now and the one we're supposed to have, right? So we're having the masses, the elites, and the politicians now. Now, the problem it is creating is that we have the masses are impoverished, that means they are very poor, the elites are very rich, and the politicians are very powerful. So you have the masses struggling with everyday life. They can't even afford to feed themselves. Then we have the masses the elites that are very rich. They are very, very rich. And then we have the politicians that are very powerful. Now, what this does to Africa is that you have millions of Africans in poverty, right? Because you have 2 classes of people working hand to hand to make themselves powerful and extremely rich, right? Now, on this type of African societal structure, it's going to be almost, in fact, it is impossible for Africa to develop. Now, like I said, we now need a new structure, a new societal structure, right? And in this new structure, this is how it's going to make Africa to develop. So you have the slaves, you have the kings, and you have the politicians, right? Now, the politicians have power, yes. Now, the kings, they are people that are not determined by whether they are rich or whether they are poor. The kings are determined by, let me put it like this: the kings, the politicians, the kings, and the slaves. These 3 status are not determined by what they have or what they possess. These 3 status, they are determined by their responsibility in the society. And that is the society we need to have. A society where status is determined by responsibility, not by resources or riches. So these 3 status, they are determined by their responsibility to society and their choices, right? So we have, let me start from the politicians. Now, the politicians, their responsibility is to create an enabling environment. They don't have anything to do with the economy. You know, this type of society we have in Africa now is the one that we're giving politicians the responsibility to develop the economy. Politicians don't have any responsibility to develop the economy. It is not their job. Their job is to create enabling environments. That is all. Provide 24/7 power supply, good roads. That is good transport system. That is their role. Now, it is the role of kings. Those are referred as kings. Now, when I say kings, I'm not talking about traditional rulers. No, I'm talking about a different type of kings, or a different type of kings. Now, the kings are in charge of the economy. They are the ones that drive the economy. They are the ones that, make sure that jobs are created for people, and they are the ones that provide value, goods and services, and every other form, that's productivity generally for the economy. they are the kings, right? Now, those are now the slaves are those that wait for the outcome of what the kings and what the politicians are doing, right? And if the outcome does not favor them, the only thing they do is they run away. Those are the slaves. So these three stages are very, very important for us to move forward as a society in Africa. Now, let me go back to who the kings are. Now, who are the kings? The kings are those that can break barriers, those that can face challenges in this continent, those that know the worth of being an African. Because one of the things I've realized is that many Africans don't know the worth of being an African, right? And because it is not taught in our schools, right? Part of why we need to have an African curriculum is so that we can teach our children the worth of being an African, right? Do you know that the future of the world is going to be black? Yes, because in the future we're going to have more blacks living on it than more whites working. When I say working, doing a particular job. So, which means that with the population that we're going to have in Africa, if we can impact them and make them valuable, you can understand how powerful Africa will be, just like China is right now. So the kings, they know the worth of being an African. They can never trade that Africanness for anything, right? And in that words, they produce, they are productive. They produce service in that words. So there's a difference between when I produce something as an African, not knowing my worth, and when I produce something as an African, I know my worth. Now the difference is that I will not settle for just any dollar or any pounds that is thrown at me, just to give you that thing that I produced. No, knowing my worth as an African is going to make me to sit with a particular price that whatever I produce is worth. And you see, it's part of the problem we have economically, because we don't know our worth as Africans. These other countries, they come and take our resources on a very cheap, because we don't know our worth, right? Once they throw dollars at us, pounds at us, we just give our resources out anyhow. It is due to the lack of knowing our worth as Africans. And that is what differentiates kings from the slaves. They know their worth, right? They believe so much in themselves. Now, another good thing about this structure in our society is that anybody can become a king, right? In the society we have today, it is very difficult for somebody within the masses to just become an elite. It is almost impossible because the gap is very wide. But in a structure where we have slaves and kings, it is very easy and anybody can, become a king, right? And also, the kings are going to also become politicians, right? Because the mindset and the mindset of a king is different, totally different. Now, in the society we have today, the mindset of the elites and the mindset of the politicians are the same. So that is why when you see an elite go into politics, they don't change anything because their mindset is the same. But this is different. When you have kings, their mindsets are very different. So if a king should go into politics, it does it differently, right? It does it differently because part of what kings understand is that Africa is a kingdom, right? And Africa being a kingdom means that Africa must have its own authority, right? Africa must have its own power over itself. So these are the things that kings understand. Now, this is the point. The point is that from now on, I am dedicated and committed to putting together a community of African kings all over African nations, whereby these kings, they are going to be the drivers of the African economy. right, with the right mentality, with the right steps, they are going to be the drivers of African economy, so that the politicians can solely face their responsibility of creating an enabling environment, right? And then from this community, we can begin to raise people, right, to become kings. And eventually we can have an Africa that is totally full of kings and queens all over. Now, my desire for Africa is to see an African where every African, wherever they are in the world, are seen as kings and queens, right? And not treated as slaves. Also, my desire is to see an Africa where anywhere you think of Africa, you think of a kingdom that has the ability to rule the world. A kingdom that has the ability to sustain the world. A kingdom that has the authority over other nations. And that is the dream and the vision for Africa. I believe strongly that Africa is going to be great, and no other continent will be as great as Africa will be. Thank you for watching this video. Please make sure this video goes viral and share with every African you know out there. Thank you.